Good afternoon, folks. How is everyone doing? Um, Welcome in. We'll give everyone a few more minutes to allow for trickle in. Um, and but please welcome. You are now attending the Shit Happens panel for the We Represent 2020 conference.
Very fitting. The slip up. I like
it. Very fitting. Oh, excuse me. Wrong button. Perfect. Again, welcome into the Shit Happens panel at We Represent 2021 conference. I hope everyone is doing well on this beautiful, beautiful day. So let's start it off. My name is Sean Funch, and I'm the Director of Data Analytics for We Represent. But more importantly, I'm your moderator for the Shit Happens panel today. The Shit Happens panel's goal is to talk about the unexpected things that happen when study abroad. The panel is going to focus on unforeseen circumstances that can happen abroad. Recognize that alumni are resilient, flexible, preserving individuals from all that shit that we can happen while we're on our exchange program. We're going to learn about how a small set of alumni navigated difficult situations and what they recommend based on their experiences. But more importantly, we're going to learn a little bit about how those experiences changed us now. So before we go, I want to introduce myself. My name is Sean Funchin. I was a Benjamin A. Gilman Scholarship winner awarded for Morocco 2019, where I studied in Rabat and taught English. I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves. Let's start off with Camille.
Hi, everyone, and sorry about the delay. I just come back from office hours. Kind of on that note.
Shit happens.
It happens. Oh, perfect. Okay, I can actually say that because that's the name of the panel. So a little bit about me. My name is Camille Bismonte, and I am a CLS 2018 scholar to Indonesia. And then in the following year, I was lucky enough to be awarded the Boren IFLI Indonesian Flagship Language Initiative scholarship from 2019 to 2020. And I'll hand it over to Brittany.
Hi, I am Brittany Edwards, a 2018 to 2019 Fulbright recipient, and I was in Taiwan.
And last but not least.
Thank you. My name is Sheen Atwa. I am a dual recipient of the Critical Language Scholarship. I studied in Tangier, Morocco in 2016 for Arabic, and then again for Swahili in Arusha, Tanzania in 2018.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everybody. What I really like about this panel for everybody is that we actually have all four of our programs that we're featuring in the conference in this one panel, if we consider me one of the panelists. So before we get started, I want to encourage those in attendance to send questions that they might have. Maybe it's about how to handle certain situations, what to better prepare for, or any questions, maybe more information about some of these stories. Because I really do enjoy this panel because it allows us to put a narrative on an amazing experience. One of the amazing experiences of study abroad is that it's a life-changing opportunity, meaning that your life will change because you go there, and it's not always just because of the good things that happen. Oftentimes, some of the scariest, most unpredicted things are what you look back on. Now, I have a question. Let's start off with Sheen. Is there any particular experience that you can think of from any of your times abroad that you would fall into this category?
Yes, a few. Shit does happen more than once, unfortunately, but I would say for my time in Morocco, there is a beautiful city called the Blue City Chefchaouen, which is very popular for its color, but also for its hashish. I say this because when you visit Morocco and this area specifically, Chefchaouen, you will be offered hashish to buy. It is a drug. It is illegal. You shouldn't be buying drugs, I mean, in general, from people you don't know, and it's just something, you should probably, be careful of. It is, you see other people smoking it who are Moroccan, but you have to be, understanding as American citizens abroad that certain rules apply to us is not something you really want to kind of be a part of and get away from as far as you can. So that's one instance I would say. It's, you kind of want to be careful. You don't expect study abroad to be offered drugs too often.
I really love that the first question we get right down to the nitty gritty of why people are actually attending this panel. And they want to hear these stories. They want to hear hashish and Chefchaouen. Amazing. So Camille, what is something unpredicted that you think back on, and while at the time it was maybe scary or nerve-wracking, now you might look back on and think of as an amazing experience?
Yeah, so I don't know if this necessarily counts as I guess it depends on how you define what an amazing experience is. But as far as things that that were a little bit out of my control, I ended up being hospitalized like overnight in Indonesia during CLS in my first week there. And actually, it was my first week ever in the country, and I didn't really know how to speak. And I ended up being hospitalized 5 times over the course of my CLS. And that was because I had a lot of stomach issues. My stomach and spicy food, which is delicious, but just doesn't go well in my stomach. So quite literally shit happened. But kind of that aside, it was just surreal that I was able to that during class we had talked about medical vocabulary and how we had a role play quite literally in our health clinic at our university for what to do if you were in a health clinic. So the kind of language you would use, like the process of like registering, because the way you register for a hospital is like similar to the United States, of course, but you have to do all this paperwork and sign your address and just remember what that vocab is. And so it was kind of weirdly reenacting it for realsies, of course, with the help of my resident director who spoke fluent Indonesian, which helped. But there were a lot of other things that kind of stressed me out about that experience, including having this nun. I don't think it's last rites, because I think last rites has to be given by a priest. I happened to be in a Catholic hospital, and they saw because of Filipino American, I also registered myself as Catholic, and so they had a nun come in and say some prayers in Indonesian or blessings, and then like she put oil on my face. It was like 4 a.m. I was like a little too incoherent to be processing what was going on and if I was about to die. So I don't know if that was amazing. I think it's like funny looking back on it now, but shit happens.
Shit happens. Camille, thank you so much. I appreciate that. You're taking a bad situation and turning it good. Hey, look, the language practice that you did in the classroom did pay off. By chance, do you know the Indonesian word for diarrhea?
I feel like it's diare or something like that. But yeah, I was having all these things, like I have it down to a T. So like Indonesian language stuff is saying like, oh, like I had the wind entered me, is like the way to say like, oh yeah, I was like feeling kind of under the weather. So it's like, oh yeah, like the wind entered me. And so I have like ma, which is like this word to say like I have like gas which is apparently a very common thing. Indonesians have it all the time. And I think it's because there's so much like spicy food incorporated in their diet, at least in that specific area of Indonesia I was from. But yeah, wasn't very compatible with my Americanized stomach, I guess.
That's awesome. And so finally, Brittany, how about you? What was an experience that you had abroad that you look back on fondly, even though in the moment it wasn't something you were expecting?
I wish we had time to go through all of the stories because there are so many, but I do have a little section on my YouTube channel that talks about Fulbright, and I'll share more there. But if you want something that ended positively, and the experiences ranges from taking my roommate in the middle of the night to a hospital where I can't communicate very well. I mean, enough to get minor points across, but that was very nerve-wracking. But it ended up on the bright side because Google Translate, speak to translate function. So that was very helpful, but not necessarily an amazing adventure. I would say the most fun adventure from something going bad was running out of gas on the mountains and not having any cell service and being at the completely wrong area for our host stay. So that just goes to show you that there's so much serendipity that happens when things do go wrong. And at the end of the day, everything's going to work out fine. You don't have to be worried that you're going to die alone in the middle of the mountain. Like, things will work out always. They always do. So that's my little story.
I love that last tidbit, Brittany, because that is the goal of this panel, is to show that bad things do occur, but we always find a way to overcome them. But I don't, that is amazing tidbit, but there's also important things that we prepare before emergencies occur, being proactive instead of reactive. So I wanted just to talk, maybe ask around, what are some of the proactive steps that you took before studying abroad or international exchange, just in case something could go wrong? Brittany, let's go back to you, because I like how you brought up Google Translate. Was it very helpful for you when you're in Taiwan?
When you need to communicate with someone, Google Translate is amazing. If you're trying to pass a test, skip it. But in terms of communicating with someone, which is, at the end of the day, the most important thing, it is very helpful. So speaking back to me using Google Translate to help at the hospital, that is something that I wish I prepared for in advance. Researching all of the hospitals or medical facilities within my area that have strong English resources, because that way when an emergency comes up, you're not kind of frazzled about, it's 11 p.m. I have to go to the hospital, which hospital is around, and do they have anyone that speaks English, or, where else can I go? What other options do I have? So that is something I didn't prepare for, but I kind of wish that I did.
I love it. So, I mean, Google Translate can only get you so far, and it definitely won't get you A's, but it'll get you to the hospital. But what we learned from Brittany is that we can actually be proactive in our steps and research some of these cares. Sheen, you have a story about taking proactive steps while you were in, was it Morocco?
Yeah, both Morocco and Tanzania. Probably, and this was actually in Tanzania. I was visiting Zanzibar, and probably best. Oh my God, I'm reliving it. One of the worst things that happened was I lost my passport. So yeah, it's pretty a big deal. I needed a passport to even get back to Tanzania, which is, the mainland, because Zanzibar is an island. So the proactive thing, which I fortunately did, was I had copies, paper copies, pictures on my phone of my passport, IDs, medical, information, medical IDs, and this helped, at least calmed me, even though I'm still like, oh no, my passport's out there, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Obviously a very kind of distressing thing, having the numbers of embassies and contacts in your program, obviously a very important thing. Fortunately, it was, my passport was just logged in between all this clothing I had bought as souvenirs from Zanzibar, so I did find it, but there was definitely a kind of a scary moment there, like, oh man, like the main thing that tells me who I am, I lost. Yeah, those kind of small preparations. We have electronic and paper backups, it does help alleviate the process.
That's amazing. I think Sheen brings up a very good point of every traveler's worst fear, and that's losing the identification. Because without it, at worst, leaves you stranded. At most, it's a very big hassle. And so Sheen talked about taking proactive steps before traveling in preparing things like backup copies for paperwork, photo identification, pictures on your phone. All of these things are proactive steps that you can do before shit happens. Because my experience is that shit is always going to happen. But instead of being reactive, we can take proactive steps. Camille, do you have any input on taking proactive steps before shit happens?
Yeah, so I guess to kind of add on to what Sheen and Brittany already said, yeah, definitely have copies. I am so incredibly lucky that my mom is an international flight attendant, and so she has all of her affairs in order. And so if I'm ever having questions about like, man, I don't have like a photocopy right on hand of my passport, and I don't want to figure out how to go to a printing shop and then like scan my own. She already had it on hand. And also just kind of like, especially as a way to kind of calm myself down, I also would call my parents, because my mom, for example, is such a learned traveler. And so she always had answers to things as far as like, figuring out like abroad insurance, or like having some other friend that she knew who was a flight attendant who was from Indonesia was also super helpful. I know that's not necessarily like a good way to prepare on your own, but I think being able to have connections that aren't necessarily your program is also super helpful, especially with the boring, which is less of a guided program like the CLS. And so it was a lot of like kind of figuring out things yourself as soon as the structured portion of it ended.
Thank you. Thank you. So I really like that. Not everyone can have a flight attendant mom, but everyone can use their network to be able to solve problems when things arise. And actually, I really like how you pivot that away towards the programs, because Anne in the chat, Sheen is typing an answer, but I think we're going to bring it live as well. Anne asks, what sort of pre-departure training did y'all programs offer that you feel equipped for your experience? Are these areas which you feel that could have been prepared better? Actually, while you guys think about that, I'll input mine. While I feel like the program itself, the Gilman, let me go through some virtual trainings, which did prepare me. For instance, learning about these proactive steps like bringing backup copies for all my information. It even talked about specific problems that face the country where I was specifically going. I thought that was really well done. But my study abroad company that I was going through, my international abroad company, they didn't prepare us very well. In fact, we didn't know about where we were staying in our host country until we landed in the country. And so while I look back on this time and think, wow, that was hilarious, that was ridiculous experience, I look back on it fondly because not many people get to jump on a plane and head to a completely different country on the other side of the world and not know where they're going to stay at the end of the day. And that's just part of the experience that I internalized. But so do you think that pre-departure training through either any of the programs that you did could have been better? And how would you make them better? Let's go with Brittany.
So honestly, I just remember right after receiving the Fulbright, and we had to go through all these preparative, filling out this, getting this done. And it was so overwhelming that I don't even think that if they had done a pre-departure, we would have gotten much from it, because there was just so much information and so much new things to process, so many new things to process. So we had an orientation when we arrived there, and that's kind of when they introductory language skills, where are these facilities such as hospitals, the numbers to call, etc. They did provide us with a website that had a fully fleshed out introduction to each county, so you could kind of get a gauge of the area you were going to. But in terms of having like a pre-departure orientation, we for Taiwan specifically didn't have it. But again, for everywhere, every Fulbright committee is run differently. So depending on where you apply, that you might have a different experience.
Camille, how was your experience on the pre-departure from the study abroad or the international exchange, either program or scholarship that you attended?
Yeah, so I think it was a little bit similar for both CLS and Boren. For CLS, it was definitely more country specific as an orientation when we were back in DC before we flew to Indonesia. Whereas the Boren was, we broke into regions. And so I felt like the pre-departure orientation for regions wasn't quite appropriate because they tossed all the Asia programs together. And as you know, East Asia is very different from Southeast Asia. And a large amount of the Borens going to Asia were going to East Asian countries. And so the panelists that they had, for example, talking about their experience wasn't necessarily relevant to us. As far as things that I wish that they equipped us for, I personally am Filipino American, I'm first generation. And so there wasn't that many surprises when it came to arriving in the host country. But what I did notice from my other cohort mates was just I just wish that they knew a little bit more about the cultural norms. For example, not just the idea of like respect, but also just how to interact or greet people. So in Indonesia, when you greet someone, it's not like a American handshake where you're like going to crush the person's hand when you're holding it. It's very much so like a light touch like this, and then you kind of put your hand over your heart, and then you also like bow a little bit, and then depending on how sorry you are, you would bow a little bit more, or if you're going to like pass by someone on the street, you say like, oh, permisi. And so there's all these like little small things that like we weren't taught, especially like if you're learning like the language and you're just focusing on how to say good morning, you forget all, they sometimes fail to mention these small little cultural nuances that we need to know. That, and also I guess just how to use the restroom. Like this is like kind of gross, but like the restrooms, for example, in one of the restrooms in school, although they also had Western toilets available, they would also have kind of this toilet that was on the ground that you had to kind of squat over. For me, that wasn't that surprising. Similarly, like for showers, they had the bucket shower. And so for me, when I visited the Philippines quite often to visit my mom's family, I already knew how to use both of those things. Whereas Americans in my cohort were like, I have no idea, and no one told me how to use these things, and now I did number 2 and I don't know how to flush it. And so like one of my roommates is from Kentucky, and she's like, no, doesn't go out of the country very often, and she's like, help. And so I was like, that's fine, it's gross, but it's fine, let me like tell you how you're supposed to flush it. And so it's all those kind of like little life skills that no one really talks about, but you should know if you're going to the country. So those are like small kind of TMI things, but things that I wish they covered, just for practicality's sake.
Like we said, shit does happen. Every Peace Corps volunteer I've ever met has a shit their pants story. So Sheen, what is something that you wish that your program, pre-departure training, would have covered? How do you think they could have done a better job?
So honestly, along the same lines as Camille with the CLS, there's the general pre-departure orientation where you get a lot of, the safety concerns. It's much more focused on how to keep yourself safe, numbers and contacts, kind of best practices. Along the same lines of like, the countries are Morocco, Jordan, and Oman for Arabic, for example. These countries are spread far apart. While they all speak Arabic, their cultures, might have similarities. They are still vastly different in many ways. So kind of like that, removing that monolithic kind of view of it, and especially having a specific kind of person who maybe had lived and studied in the country to kind of really kind of talk about these cultural nuances, as Camille mentioned. I mean, it's a very kind of important thing, especially like, for example, I'm Egyptian American, and I went during Ramadan. So while people are fasting, for example, kind of the social, kind of cultural and religious sensitivity around that, and as far as like understanding, like it's, people aren't going to be eating, so kind of being careful about how you're maybe eating around people, or how, offering food to people or things like that. These are things that you learn along the way, and like Brittany said, there's so much that you cannot get it all in 3 days. They do a great job, but there are definitely some areas could be improved upon. And along the same lines of what Camille said, like the small things like greetings. Like I remember when I went to my host family, it was me and two other participants, and they were walking in, and I started taking off my shoes because that's just culturally what I do. And the host family was like, no, don't worry about it. And so the two other participants look at me, still untying my shoe. I'm like, they say no, but it's nicer to still do it, even though they said no. And they appreciate that kind of small tidbit to like, oh, okay, I'm gonna really try to be as respectful as possible. Obviously, most people are open to it. It's just kind of, you're not really taught those small things that really do make a big difference.
Thank you. I really like this. We're going to pivot away. I really like part of an ongoing theme throughout our conversation, our last question, talked about how identity plays into our ability to handle things when shit happens. Now, identity for each of us plays a different comparatively to each of the country we found ourselves in. My experience in Morocco is probably different than Sheen's experience in Morocco, versus it's also probably different as Brittany's experience in Taiwan. How do you think that identity played a role in how you overcome things or faced things while you were abroad? Anyone who would like to take a shot at it?
I guess I can begin. As a Southeast Asian, people just assumed I was Indonesian. And then that, I guess, was also added on to the fact that I was the only person of color in my Boran cohort. For what it's worth, there's 8 people in my cohort, so it was tiny compared to like my CLS cohort of like, I think 26, 28 people. So that was a little bit different, of course, just by nature of how many people there are. But being the only person of color made me stick out even more, especially when I would meet Indonesians. For example, if we were on cultural trips and the person who would be giving us a tour would just assume I was one of the translators or one of the people helping the program. Or even when I was in Indonesia, when I was interning, I also volunteered on the weekends at the America Center, so the American Cultural Center in Jakarta, run by the embassy. And they had native English speaker conversation coffee chats every 2 weeks. So I went in for the first time with my roommate, who's, a white girl from Kentucky. And I sat down in the native English chair and they're like, "You're American?" And I was like, yeah, I'm American. I was born and raised in like America, I'm from California. That's why I sound like I'm tired all the time, that classic little Bay Area accent. And one of them, it was like a Mean Girls movie moment where one of the people in my group looked at me and was like, "If you're American, why are you Asian?" And I was like, oh my goodness, like you can't just say what you can't just ask people why they're Asian. And so it was like very much so like oh my goodness. And so I had to respond and I was like, okay, all right, yes, I'm Asian. Like I'm definitely Asian. I'm Filipino American. My parents were born and raised in the Philippines. My parents were born in the Philippines. And then they'll be like, "Oh, so you're Filipino?" No, I'm actually American. And so it was this, I wasn't necessarily offended. It was more like, I definitely took more of a stance of like being humorous in it, because it's like, yeah, I think all Indonesians look Filipino as far as I'm concerned, and yeah, it's just this need for additional exposure and the need that we just need more diversity in general for these international exchange programs to show the fullness of what American identity is, or being American is so much more encompassing than just what you see on I guess, I don't know, as like a WASP, for example, we come from a variety of different socioeconomic backgrounds, racial ethnicities and whatnot. And so it's just kind of, it's important to have those kind of jarring experiences, I suppose, where people come to understand that you're also American, you're also part of this conglomeration of races, even if you look exactly like them.
Thank you so much, Camille. That was really succinct, and it puts this whole conference into perspective. I appreciate that. So how about the other panelists? How did identity play a role in overcoming obstacles or creating obstacles while you were abroad?
I can go, I guess. So as I mentioned, in Morocco, I am out of descent, out of American, Egyptian American, and I'm Muslim also, in a majority Muslim country, and I am a majority, out of country in some ways. So for me, it wasn't as much as as Camille said, there were definitely those, so you're Egyptian, so there's this idea of like you can't be American also, or be American and have his ancestors from other places. It's kind of like face value. And for me, I ended up taking on kind of a leadership role because of my identity. Because if there were certain topics that people may not be familiar with, as far as like Muslim practices or in Islam and certain things to kind of say or do, I'd be kind of the one that was asked a lot of times, and at points it did become taxing, but I also understood that it was kind of an important thing because people wanted to kind of make those connections and understand it more. As far as kind of the reverse, I kind of was able to show people in Morocco specifically, like me being out of American and being Muslim in America, I could talk about my experiences and kind of really let them explore. Like, okay, so what we may see in movies or on the news aren't always the case. Like there's not necessarily this no safe haven for Muslims or whatever people might have feelings or beliefs about. So that was kind of a very kind of I worked both sides in that sense. And yeah, in Tanzania, obviously Tanzania is most of the people who live there are Black, and I am not Black, so there was not as that there is a little bit more of understanding kind of the privilege that I'm bringing with me in that situation. So it's a totally different thing where I'm in a country of where I am maybe part of the culture and the ethnicity in the background, and the country where I am not, to kind of realizing that those privileges are inherent with being American, also being a non-Black American in a Black country.
This is such a big topic to unpack for me. It has so many different facets, from beginning with severed language. So I can speak a little bit of Chinese Mandarin, which is mostly what's spoken in Taiwan. There is also Taiwanese, and then the Aboriginal or the indigenous languages. But I don't think people really realize that when you lose language, you lose a lot of your identity. So I characterize as someone that's very, witty, humorous. I like to have intellectually stimulating conversations. And when you can only order food and kind of have baseline conversations, that completely strips away that way that you identify with yourself or how your whole existence is determined. So that was something that was major for me. But in that absence, I became more familiar with other parts of myself or discovered other parts of myself. Then you have the part where I, similar to Camille, was getting questions like, if you're from America, why are you Black? Is your hair natural? What is going on? Like, just all these questions. Are your parents Black? So I was in a more rural area of Taiwan, and there were a lot of people that had never seen a Black person before. And that was jarring. So my identity was always in my face. Here is another part of it, right? That identity gave me privilege sometimes because I was special. I was a novelty. So I got special treatment. And that was jarring because it just accentuates how traumatized you are from living in America as a Black person. And then you also have that part of just always being aware of that identity, aware that that identity gives you privilege, but then it also sometimes gives you the familiar experience. So by that, I mean, yes, sometimes people loved me and were excited to see me, but I also had children crying because they were afraid of me. And I didn't even say anything to them. So there's all of that happening. And then you have people who are POC in America, maybe they're mixed and they're really, really light skinned. And they've just always been passing, or maybe they grew up with their non-Black parent and they never identified as being Black. But then in Taiwan, they're referred to as Black. And then that just completely upheaves and changes the way that they perceive themselves. Then you also have the Asian American students with Asian heritage that were, they weren't regarded as highly as the Americans that looked like the stereotypical whatever they've been taught an American looks like. And they had a hard experience because I think there's this feeling of maybe ostracization. And there's a little bit of that. And they're treated a little bit less than the people that look like the stereotypical American. And all of those layers are coexisting at one time for each person. So it's a lot. Yes, your identity is impacted by going abroad. And I don't think that's definitely not something that people think about a lot going there in advance. And so me, I am Jamaican American, my family, my parents, they're both Jamaican, first generation Americans. So I am familiar with kind of coming from a different cultural background as the masses around, but it's so different when you are in an entire place that is different.
I really love that. I really love how a lot of running through all of our talks is this idea that we do want to promote diversity and study abroad, because we do want to promote that America is a diverse country, that there are multiple ethnicities, cultures, all at play here. And in that, we are trying to change the perception of how people view America. We're changing on the outside. But study abroad also has international exchange, also has amazing experiences on changing us as well. So Anne Anne in the chat question asked a really great question. How would you define or describe your level of self-awareness before your departure, and how did you improve afterwards? So this is really a question of, how did study abroad change you? Did this incredible life-changing experience, that unpredictable things happen, how did that change you who you are now? And I would love if you guys could all talk a little bit about what you guys are doing now, because everyone in this room has amazing projects that they're working on or working towards, and I would love to hear more about that.
Okay, I guess I'll start.
Let's do it.
Taiwan was such a transformative time for me. You can't really go into depth, but let's just say I had a huge spiritual glow up, and I don't know how much of that has to do with Taiwan and how much of it has to do with timing. I imagine that a lot of it has to do with Taiwan, just because without the comforts or things that you're familiar with having around you, it kind of forces you to maybe look into yourself or look around you and just understand and grow so much more. There wasn't anything like traumatizing that happened in Taiwan that caused my change, but because of my time there, I actually wrote a book on Taiwan, and it just released in December. And fun fact, surprise, today's my birthday, and I am giving away a free download on Amazon. So you can get an Amazon ebook Kindle version of it It's just Taiwan, an underrated paradise. And I am currently also building a YouTube empire, and I have a little section on there that has some Fulbright 8 reasons you shouldn't do Fulbright. It's not crunchy, I promise. It's very entertaining, but those are the things that I'm doing now, and a lot of that was impacted by my time there. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brittany. I love that. A happy birthday. Thank you so much. Could you please put a YouTube link in the chat so we can share it with the attendees? Thank you so much. That is amazing. So Camille, how about you? How did study abroad change you, and what are the benefits, and how is it still affecting you today?
Yeah, I think so. I think definitely my experience in the Bourne really affected me as far as just noticing the disparity in diversity for not just programs like Bourne, but in general, just the international relations sphere. And so a part of that is I, along with some other friends in Bourne, ended up creating the Global Community College Transfers, so Global CC Transfers. We're updating our website, but I will put in our link to our LinkedIn and whatnot afterwards. So basically the Global Community College Transfers Network aims to help close this knowledge gap of just that, close this knowledge gap of different resources that you can have, or international scholarships or other careers in IR that you can have for public institutions or underserved institutions. And so mainly kind of like how we represent conferences, motto is a conference by us, for us. Similarly, Global Community College Transfer Students is by transfer students, for transfer students. And so we provide that kind of mentorship also for community college students or people who recently transferred from the community college system to four-year institutions in order to pursue careers in IR. And so the Critical Language Scholarship is one of the few scholarships, along with the Gilman Scholarship, where you can apply as a community college student. For the Boren, you can't apply as a community college student, but similarly with the Fulbright, you have to have graduated. And so really it's all about setting this foundation for community college students to realize that they can continue past just the study abroad opportunity and make it a career, which I think appeals a lot more for non-traditional students who are also, oh, you can apply for Boren as a CC student? My bad, so sorry. You're right, there's associates. I just did a talk about this in the nuts and bolts section. So sorry, that was on me. Thank you. But yeah, so it's kind of, a lot of people view study abroad as kind of, I guess, this opportunity to gallivant in Tuscany for summer, which is super fun, but it's also an opportunity to be able to connect with new cultures, to learn new languages, to gain exposure to the greater world around you. And it's also an opportunity to enter a career in not just like the foreign service, for example, but just like in international relations in general. And so I think those language skills, especially for critical languages or preferred languages, is depending on if you're what scholarship you're talking about, is incredibly important. And so really we our main thing is to provide mentorship for community college students and also serve as intermediaries for programs like USAID, Peace Corps, DOD, DOS, all these institutions that really want community college students but don't know how to recruit them or don't know how to reach out. I saw someone saying, can I have more information? Yes, of course. If you have any questions, please send it over to Global. I'm going to type it right over here. Actually, it's run by, our founder is actually friends with Sean, so it's like small world. He's a community college student. Yeah, we actually have, this is my last little plug, so sorry about taking all this space. And that is that we will have a Summer Institute coming up in late May. It's entirely free just to sign up for kind of having a conference that has this panel of figuring out like what a diplomat is, talking to Pickering and Wrangles. And so it's really about connecting community college students who are like just beginning their career along with seniors in their field and just kind of getting more exposure to what a career in IR looks like. We usually focus on Pell Grant recipients, but we're trying to expand our mentorship cohort. So if you're a community college student, please email our email. And so I'd be more than happy to connect you to where you should be.
Amazing, amazing. And so Sheen, how do you think that your experiences abroad changed you and changed what you're doing now?
You know, along the lines of when Brittany speaking about identity, I think that's a very important part about, you know, you lose a lot of, you know, these kind of nuances in our personalities. Like if we're witty, we're funny, we're quick to reply. When you're learning a second language or a third language or a fourth language, you're much more, a lot of times, reserved, because you're kind of making that transition of what you need to say, how you need to say it, and also, you know, along cultural lines, if things are appropriate to say or not. So for me, I think what studying abroad specifically did for me is really helped me with kind of being more calm and adaptable in these situations. You know, in English, I'm normally very quick to answer. But you know, having to use a second language consistently, I was a lot more focused and deliberate about what I was saying to make sure my point was across, because I didn't want to be misunderstood, especially when you have topics of politics, religion, identity. You know, these things are very important, and they also have, you know, we have this kind of emotional connection to them a lot of times. So you don't want to kind of just throw out all of your emotion and for no reason, and nobody understood what you were saying because you kind of, you know, didn't really put the pieces together. So it helped me kind of make that transition into being more calm and deliberate about how I go about and speak and engage with people. So how that kind of helped me now, I currently run an online forum, all volunteer based, where me and some other people, a lot of them from CLS, Fulbright, Boren, Gilman, teach Arabic, but the focus is not just on language, it's on cultural competency. So, you know, kind of these things that we're missing maybe in pre-departure, as we had mentioned before, where we kind of go deeper into it, you know, kind of how to traverse it, you know, how to traverse the culture in good ways. And because we have such a great and diverse group of people, from the people who are helping teach to those who are participating, you know, there's a lot of stones are overturned, and like really nothing is like is off topic. Now, you know, as long as people are open and we're using Arabic, you're gaining kind of both, you know, the language using, but also a lot of cultural competency, which is honestly just as important most times.
That is amazing. So I want to just say, give our panel a round of applause, even though no one can hear us. That was amazing, guys. I'm really inspired by this panel, and I hope that the attendees are inspired as well. It was an amazing job. Who would have thought we would have learned so much from a panel called Shit Happens, right? But that's exactly what study abroad is. It's unexpected. It's putting yourselves in pseudo dangerous, maybe, but unexpected places, and you get unexpected results. And now we are unexpected people doing unexpected things. I really want to say thank you very much to the panel. I also want to say happy birthday to Brittany and our tech host for this panel, Helen. And I want to say thank you everyone for coming in. And so before I go, I want to, first of all, I do want to send, before we leave, I do want to send a survey to all the attendees. If you guys could please complete that for a chance to be entered into our raffle for prizes and gifts. And if the panelists can actually stick around after the meeting just for about 3 minutes, so I can promote you to attendees so that you can complete the panel as well. So the panelists and attendees, the survey is right below from our Pisces Helen. But I'm a Pisces, but I want to be a killer whale as well. So without further ado, thank you very much for all of our attendees. I appreciate it. I encourage you to keep continuing watching our panels for today. Up next, we have a helping personal statement panel for both Fulbright, Gilman, CLS, and Boren. But thank you again very much, guys. Have a wonderful day. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone here. I think we did a really amazing job, and you guys are all amazing people doing amazing things. I'm really happy to meet you. Again, thank you very much for your time for the conference.
And thank you so much for hosting us, Sean, and for being such a fantastic moderator.
Yes, thank you so much.
Moderating.
Yeah, I was like,
Oh, thank you guys.
Sean, you made it easy.
No. We'll see. The administration said, who needs to moderate a shit happens panel? We're like, okay, let's give it Sean. Yeah, Sean will do it. But no, it was my pleasure. It's really my favorite. It was my favorite host, and I'm really glad to have got to moderate it.